While the Grey Company journeyed south to the aid of Aragorn, we came upon a Dunlanding hag named Gwillian, called the Old Woman of the Mountain. She sought to raise an army of ancient evil to aid the White Hand against Rohan. It was our duty, Amlon's and mine, to keep her at bay.
Storm on Methedras is the most recently added skirmish in the Lord of the Rings Online. This is set in Dunland, at the very south end of the Misty Mountains. Here we work with three friends here. Círdan, one of the rangers. Amlon, another ranger. And we also have a Dunlanding drummer. In larger runs, you will have more than one drummer. Now we begin by having to capture the courtyard gate. Now this follows a typical pattern where you will clear out a section, then you will defend against counterattacks with the aid of some defenders. Therefore the rangers aren't with me yet. They're doing their typical trick of letting me do all the work. I'm running this at tier 2. Now in this skirmish, there are a couple of tricky pulls here, but the trickiest part tends to be in the counterattacks rather than the main section. But occasionally, if you do some bad pulling, you may wind up into a little spot of trouble. Especially if you're one of those classes that can't handle large numbers of mobs at one time. Maybe I should have gone into stealth first, but no, it looks like I made it. Oh, not a good pull. Now we are on Mount Methedras, which is the southernmost peak of the Misty Mountains. This is in Dunland. Much of what you will see in this skirmish is based on what's in Dunland and Enedwaith. So for the purposes of this video, when I make a reference to Dunland, I probably also mean Enedwaith too, in most cases. Since in Dunland and in Enedwaith you run to Dunlandings and you run into certain creatures that are typical of it. Now these walking trees are not typical of Dunland. Now, this Forestborn Reaver. This Forestborn Reaver is not part of the counterattack. He's a supernumerary. He just happened to have been patrolling the region. It's very easy to pull a few extra mobs that aren't part of the counterattacks. That's the main challenge to them. It's not really the mobs in the counterattack. It's the mobs that you may pull that aren't really part of it. Makes it easy to bite off more than you can chew at a time. So that was 2 counterattacks. Now there's a third. And of course the other challenge is keeping Círdan alive. Now you notice that there's a message here concerning an encounter. This is because the encounters come in the middle of the 3rd counterattack. Oh, where is? Ah, there he is. Now, this guy has a mentality like a Blood Rook. which means he can be very nasty if you don't take care of the rest of the mobs before he pops in. Now, the mobs you find out here, you have these lights, which are typical things you'll find in Dunland, though you'll also run into them in places like Evendim. Now, these Kuthro, these are unique to Dunland. And the Kuthro and some of the other creatures come from Welsh mythology. As Turbine chose to use Wales as their basis for Dunland. This is why they call him Elthudan instead of a name that would be more typical of the English. Now, what do we have here? Now, these creatures are more of the creatures you meet in Dunland. They're these big beasts. The first one I ever run into was an Enenwythe. And in that case, it was this one that was for a single quest with this elite one you had to face at some point. And here are the demonic goats. Okay, he's had his back on me, so he didn't notice it when I hit the goat. The Drugavar, or however you pronounce that. I'm not very good with Welsh names. Now, what were they looking at? Ah! They must have been talking to Saruman. This is how far south you are. You can even see Orthanc from here. Now, it's rather strange that you could start to play the skirmish at level 20, considering that you'll be facing creatures that you won't be seeing until you reach Dunland or Enenwythe. You have a storyline that ties in to some extent with that of Enenwythe and continued in Dunland. Therefore, I really don't consider this to be a typical skirmish that you would think of for this level. Oh, we managed to pull one of these things again. Hello, where's that Reaper? So therefore, if you're afraid of spoilers or the like, then I suggest that you avoid the skirmish until you run into the series about the middle of Dunland, or actually maybe closer to the end of it, when you're in the Gravenwood. After you finish the Gravenwood, would be a good time story-wise to fit this in. Because I feel like that this helps to close a chain that is started when you're in Enenwythe, continued in the Gravenwood in Dunland, and then finally concluded here. Therefore, you might even want to skip the end of this video and perhaps the Methedras series if a spoiler on that matter is your worry. Now here we have a giant. He's the other encounter mob we'll be facing today. Now there'll be 4 encounters that are possible. There are 4 that are possible at the first control point, 4 at the second, and you'll get 1 of each. Now, Carr here has a shield like you have on the Daywalker Berserker. And you'll note that the encounters here, all of them have some sort of ability from a lieutenant. There are no lieutenants that actually appear in the counterattacks, except for those that you pull in by accident in the next area. Instead, you have encounter mobs that come in the third counterattack. That have abilities that are the same as you'll find on lieutenants. So they're sort of a replacement for the lieutenants. It's an interesting mechanism to use. Now this skirmish has a rather variable mob density, so it's hard to predict exactly how much you'll be facing. But it tends to be a little bit higher than you'll find in Thievery and Mischief. Probably generally closer to what you'll get in Tuckborough, but not always the same amount. It's just that you'll have about 3 groups in each one, so it's very easy to get into a real mess. Because if you run into 3 lieutenants and a large mass of mobs, you get yourself overwhelmed very quickly. It can get worse than the courtyard in Tuckborough. Now that is a zealot there. Now these balls of light have their usual ability of blinding you. And the Kuthro, they like to use fear abilities. And they have their typical dread, which I counter with my glass to keep my +1 hope. Oh yeah, get flax moving. Now we have this another ball of light, and we could finish up here. And in this skirmish, they do have burrowers, even in solo runs, which is something you generally don't find in solo skirmishes, since the hill mobs and the weak mobs don't burrow in many early skirmishes. But in this skirmish you will find burrowers. And now we are at the boss fight. Let's take the control point and we'll activate the boss. And now we get the 2 rangers, and we finally get the arrival of the drummer, who starts playing. And the old woman gives her a speech. Now the reason why I'm looking up like this is that she is going to be bringing in a Drake, similar to what happens in Gondaman. Except in this case, the Drake is elite. And you don't have to worry about fighting the old woman at the same time. Now you also see Flax there is fighting some baby drakes. And that is the other challenge here, is that I am trying to keep the big drake off of there. And she is trying to protect the drummer. Now the reason we care about the drummer is that the big drake has some nasty abilities, and they're being countered by the drummer. The second thing is, if the drummer dies, the old woman escapes and runs away. So therefore, if you want to get full loot, you have to kill the old woman. Now, You still can complete the skirmish, because after the old woman is pleased or is dead, you can then take the flag. Now that she's dead, I can loot her body and get my bounty. Then I can take the flag. And I get the chest. The chest pops up whether or not you defeat the old woman, because that's the main bounty. So in this skirmish you can get double loot if you save the drummer. And that is Storm on Methedras. Till next time, this is Pine Leaf Needles. May your shield protect you, and your spear never break.